Hello, Pack. The Alpha King of Ironhold had been dying for 11 days. His healers had tried everything they knew and several things they didn't. His council had begun the quiet, careful work of succession. His wolf, the great silver beast that had fought beside him at the Stormlands Pass and carried 2 dead soldiers home on its back, had stopped eating on the 3rd day, and no one could get near it. What no one had done was send for Marin. That was a mistake. It was also depending on how you looked at it, the only thing that saved them. She came for the work? She had no idea what she was walking into. Let's begin. Marin had been 3 days' ride from Ironhold when the council's rider caught up with her on the old road through the high pine country. She was already moving. Her traveling practice took her between 6 packs in the cold months, and she had learned long ago to keep her cart stocked and her schedule loose. The rider said the Alpha King was dying. He said the fortress healers had exhausted their methods. He said the council was offering triple her usual rate. She said she would need to see the case herself before she promised anything. The rider looked at her like she had suggested something offensive. She handed him a biscuit from her pack and told him to eat before he fell off his horse. She arrived at Ironhold on a grey morning, with frost still on the stones. Her cart was ordinary, a healer's cart, worn leather and iron fittings, a bone-handled medical kit secured under the seat that had belonged to her father and his father before him. The wolves at the gate watched her come up the road. They did not bow. They were too thin, too still, with the particular quietness of animals that have been holding their breath for a long time. The gate captain met her at the entrance. He was a broad man with a careful face, and he looked at her the way the rider had, like she was smaller than the problem. "You're the healer," he said. "I am," Marin said. "The others couldn't help him. I heard." She climbed down from the cart and lifted her kit. "Where is he?" The captain led her through the outer courtyard and into the keep. She noticed the wolves as she passed them. 3 in the courtyard, 2 more at the inner door, all of them oriented in the same direction, toward the upper floors, like compass needles pointing north. She noticed the servants, who moved too quietly, and the council members who gathered in doorways and did not speak to her. She noticed the torches burning lower than they should have been, as if no one had thought to tend them. She noticed at the top of the stairs a wolf she had not seen before. It was silver, and it was enormous, and it was lying across the threshold of a closed door with its head on its paws. It was not sleeping. Its eyes were open, pale gray, almost colorless, and they tracked her from the moment she rounded the landing. There were 2 handlers standing a careful distance from it, with the look of men who had given up trying to move it some days ago. "That's his," the captain said quietly. "Been there since the 4th day. Won't eat, won't move." Marin looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at her. "Has anyone tried sitting with it?" she asked. "Sitting with it instead of moving it?" The captain did not answer. She took that as a no. She crossed the landing toward the door. The wolf watched her come. She stopped a few feet from it and set her kit down on the stone floor and crouched, which put her at roughly its eye level. It was, up close, even larger than it had appeared, a war-wolf built for the Stormlands, with old scars mapped across its muzzle and shoulders. It smelled of stone dust and something sharper underneath, something that was not quite grief, but was adjacent to it. "I'm going to go in and look at him," she said to the wolf. Quietly, the way she would speak to any patient who didn't have words. The wolf held very still. "I'm not promising anything yet," she said. "I need to see what's happening first." One of the handlers made a small sound. She ignored it. The wolf stood up. It did not move toward her. It turned and faced the door and then sat back down beside it, which was not the same as blocking it. The handlers exchanged a look she did not bother to interpret. She picked up her kit, stood and pushed the door open. The room beyond was dark. Someone had closed the shutters, and the only light came from a low fire and 2 candles burning on the table beside the bed. The air was wrong, not foul exactly, but layered, the particular quality of a room that had been breathed in for too long without fresh air. She crossed to the shutters and opened them before she looked at the patient, because that was the first thing she always did. Cold air came in, the room shifted. She turned to the bed. The Alpha King of Ironhold was 34 years old. She knew that from the council's letter. What the letter had not prepared her for was the stillness of him. The way he lay without the restless motion of a man fighting illness, as if whatever had hold of him had already won the argument and was simply waiting for him to agree. He was pale in the way of deep cold, not fever. His breathing was shallow and even. His hands were flat on the blanket, open, which she noted without knowing yet why it mattered. She set her kit on the table and began to work. The fortress healers had been thorough. She would give them that. Their notes were meticulous and wrong in a specific way she recognized. They had treated the symptoms correctly and missed the cause entirely. What was killing the Alpha King of Ironhold was not the fever that had come and gone in the first week, not the weakness in his lungs, not the exhaustion that had settled into his bones like sediment. What was killing him was older than any of those things. It was a root poison, slow-working, the kind that came from sustained exposure over weeks rather than a single dose. It had been in something he touched or breathed every day, and no one had looked for it because no one had thought to look. She looked for it for 2 hours. She found it in the herbs bundled above his window, dried, hung there for fragrance, completely ordinary-looking, and laced with something that did not belong in them. Not enough to kill quickly, enough to kill slowly, which was worse. She took the bundle down and threw it into the fire. Then she opened her kit and began. What she did over the next 6 hours was not dramatic. It was precise. It was the kind of work that looked like nothing from the outside. Small doses of specific compounds at specific intervals, a tea that smelled terrible and had to be administered in careful spoonfuls to a man who could barely swallow a poultice applied to the pressure points at his wrists and throat, that she changed twice. She talked to him while she worked, not because she thought he could hear her, but because silence made the work harder, and she had learned that, years ago at some point the wolf came in, she did not hear the door. She became aware of it gradually, a warmth at her left side, a presence that was too large to be a person and too quiet to have announced itself. She looked, and the wolf was there, sitting beside the bed, watching the man in it with the same gray attention it had given her on the landing. She went back to work. Around the 4th hour, the Alpha King's breathing changed. It deepened. The shallowness that had been his breathing since she arrived began to ease slowly the way ice eases in early spring. Not all at once, but in stages, each one slightly less than the one before it. His color shifted. The flat, cold pallor gave way to something that was still pale but was alive in a way the other had not been. The wolf made a sound, not a howl, something quieter. A low chest, deep exhale, almost a word. Marin looked at it. "Not yet," she said. "Give him a little longer." The wolf looked at her. It lay down. She kept working. Just before dawn, the Alpha King of Ironhold opened his eyes. He did not speak. He looked at the ceiling for a moment, then turned his head and looked at her. And then, slowly, as if it cost him something, he looked at the wolf. The wolf had its head up. Its tail moved once, just once, and then went still. "You're going to feel terrible for several more days," Marin said. "The poison has been in your system for weeks. Your body needs time to clear it." He looked at her. His voice, when it came, was rough with disuse. "Who are you, Marin?" "Your council sent for me." He was quiet for a moment. His eyes moved to the window where the first gray light was beginning to come through. "The herbs," he said. "Yes. How long?" 3 weeks. I estimate. Possibly 4. Something moved in his expression. Not surprise. Something older than surprise. The particular look of a man who has been trying to find the shape of a thing and has just been handed the answer. His eyes went back to the ceiling. "Thank you," he said, flat and final, no explanation offered, none needed. "Sleep," she said. "I'll be here when you wake up." She had not planned to say that. She filed it away without knowing why. The wolf did not move from the floor beside the bed. On the second day, the council came. There were 4 of them: the senior advisor, an elder, a woman Marin did not know, who moved with the careful authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in a room, and the younger man, who said nothing and watched everything. They came while the Alpha King was sleeping, which she suspected was deliberate. The senior advisor was a man with a smooth voice and very careful enunciation. He thanked her for her service. He asked when the Alpha King might be moved to a more appropriate recovery location. He used the phrase "more appropriate recovery location" twice, which told her what he meant without requiring him to say it. "He shouldn't be moved for at least a week," she said. "Surely a shorter timeline. He was poisoned for 4 weeks. His body is clearing it. Moving him before it's finished could restart the process. I won't recommend it." The smooth voice went a fraction smoother. "We weren't aware you'd be staying on." "I wasn't aware I wouldn't be," she said. The woman, the elder with a careful authority, looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked at the wolf, which had not moved from its position beside the bed since the night before. Then she looked back at Marin with an expression that Marin could not quite read. "The wolf," the elder said. "Has it eaten?" "Not that I've seen. I've asked the kitchen to send something up." "Has it allowed you near it?" "Yes." The elder was quiet for a moment. Then, "Interesting." She said it the way someone says a word when they mean something much larger by it. And then she turned and led the council out without explaining herself. The younger man, who had said nothing, paused in the doorway. He looked at Marin, then at the wolf, then at the sleeping king. "His name is Vaelor," he said. "In case he hasn't told you, he left before." She could respond. She looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at her. "Vaelor," she said quietly, testing the shape of it. The wolf's ears moved. She went back to work. On the 3rd day, the Alpha King sat up. He did it slowly, and she led him, watching from the chair she had pulled to the window where she had been reviewing her notes. He got himself upright and stayed there for a moment, taking stock of the fact that he was vertical, and then he looked at her. "You slept in the chair," he said. "The wolf wouldn't let anyone else in the room. I didn't want to leave the patient." A pause. "The wolf let you in?" "The wolf let me in," she agreed. He looked at the wolf, which was now sitting beside her chair, with its shoulder pressed against her knee in a way that had happened gradually over the past day, and which she had not commented on. Vaelor looked at this for a moment with an expression she was beginning to recognize, something that started as stillness and then became something else, something quieter, as if he were watching a thing he did not have a name for and was deciding whether to find one. "He doesn't do that," Vaelor said. "Press against people. Allow contact from anyone outside the pack." She looked down at the wolf. The wolf looked up at her with its pale gray eyes. "He seems to have revised his policy," she said. Something shifted in Vaelor's expression, not quite a smile, close enough. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I was poisoned for 4 weeks. That's accurate." She stood and crossed to the bed and checked his pulse at his wrist, which was stronger than yesterday and steadier than the day before. "The worst of it is through. You'll have fatigue for another week, possibly 2. Appetite will come back in stages. Don't let anyone rush you." He watched her work with the particular attention of a man who was used to watching things and not accustomed to being watched in return. She was aware of it the way she was aware of the wolf's warmth at her side. As a fact, not a problem. "The herbs," he said, "above the window. I burned them. I know. I mean, who put them there? That's a question for your council, she said, and possibly your guard. He was quiet for a moment. His eyes went to the window, then back to her. You found something they missed for 4 weeks? I looked for different things. Why? She set his wrist down. Because the symptoms didn't match the diagnosis. If you treat what's visible and ignore what's underneath it, you'll keep treating the wrong thing. That's not a failing unique to your healers. It's a common one. He held her gaze for a moment. His eyes were gray, she noticed, not pale like the wolf's, but darker, the color of stone in winter light. You're not from a pack, he said. I travel between them. No allegiance. My allegiance is to the patient. He was quiet again, then. The council will want to know when you're leaving. I expect they will. She picked up her kit and moved back to the chair. What do you want to know? The silence stretched. Stay through the week, he said finally. Flat and final. All right, she said. The wolf settled back against her knee. On the 5th day, Vaelor walked to the window. It was the first time he had been on his beat, and she watched him do it from the doorway. She had stepped out to speak to the kitchen staff and come back to find him standing at the open shutters in the gray morning light, one hand on the stone frame, looking out over the courtyard below. He was steadier than she had expected. He was also, she noted, barefoot on cold stone, which she was going to address. There are wolves in the courtyard, he said without turning. There have been wolves in the courtyard since I arrived. They're different now. A pause. They were waiting. Now they're not. She came to stand beside him and looked down. He was right. The wolves below moved with a different quality than they had on her arrival, less held, less compressed. One of them looked up, and she had the distinct sensation of being seen from a distance in a way that was not threatening, but was not casual either. They knew, he said, still not looking at her. Before I did. She wasn't certain what he meant. She filed it away without knowing why. You need to put something on your feet, she said. He looked down at his bare feet on the stone floor, and then up at her with an expression that was, very briefly, startled. Then it settled back into the controlled stillness. She was learning to read as his default. Yes, he said. And you should sit down. You've been standing for 10 minutes and your hands are shaking. He looked at his hands. They were, in fact, shaking, faintly, the kind of tremor that came from muscles that had been still too long being asked to work again. I didn't notice, he said. I know. She moved to the chair and pulled it closer to the window. Sit here. You can still see the courtyard. He sat. The wolf moved from the corner of the room and settled beside the chair, and Vaelor put his hand on its head. Not a deliberate gesture, she thought. More the automatic movement of a man reaching for something that had always been there. She watched his face as he did it. Something eased in it. Not much, just a fraction. She went to check on her notes and did not say anything about what she had seen. On the 6th day, the elder came back, alone this time, without the rest of the council. In the early evening, when the torches in the corridor were just being lit, she knocked, which the others had not done, and waited until Marin opened the door. May I come in? The elder asked. Marin stepped aside. The elder's name, she learned, was Senna. She was old in the way of people who had been formidable for so long that age had simply become another expression of it. She took the chair that Marin offered and looked at the Alpha King, who was awake and sitting up with a book he was not quite reading. You look better, Senna said to him. I'm told I will feel better in approximately another week, he said. The healer's estimate. Senna looked at Marin with the same unreadable expression she had used on the 2nd day. Sit down, she said. I'm not here to inspect you. I'm here because there's something you should know before the full council meets tomorrow. Marin sat. The wolf, which had been at Vaelor's side, moved and lay down between the two chairs. Senna looked at the wolf for a moment, then, the council is going to ask you to leave, she said to Marin, not because of the healing, Because of the wolf. The wolf didn't do anything, Marin said. The wolf has been at your side for 5 days, Senna said. The king's wolf. The wolf that has not allowed contact from anyone outside the pack in the 4 years since Vaelor's mate left. The wolf that stopped eating when the king began to die and started eating again the night you arrived. She paused. They're going to call it a complication. They're going to say it's an attachment that needs to be managed. Marin looked at Vaelor. He was looking at the book. His jaw was set. What do you call it? She asked Senna. The elder was quiet for a moment. I call it the wolf, knowing something the king hasn't said yet. She stood. I thought you should hear it before tomorrow, so you're not surprised. She paused at the door. The wolf brought her a piece of his old armor yesterday, she said to Vaelor without turning around. The piece from the Stormlands campaign. I thought you should know that too. She left. Marin looked at the wolf. She had not known about the armor. She thought about the wolf disappearing for an hour in the afternoon and returning to press against her knee. And she thought about the weight she had felt against her leg. And dismissed as the wolf settling, she looked at Vaelor. He had closed the book. He was looking at the fire. Is that true? She asked. A pause. Yes. When were you going to tell me? I wasn't certain I was going to. She held that answer for a moment. Then, what does it mean? The armor. He was quiet for a long time. The fire burned low, and she did not get up to tend it. It means... He's decided something, Vaelor said. He doesn't do things without reason. He brought it to you because... Started again more carefully. He brought it to you because it was the most significant thing he had to give. She did not speak. I'm sorry, Vaelor said. It wasn't fair to you. He acts on what I... He stopped again. His hands were flat on the book cover, very still. He acts on what I don't allow myself to. The silence stretched. How long? She asked. He looked at her then directly, the way he had not quite done before. Since you came through the door, he said. The first morning? She held his gaze. You were barely conscious the first morning. I know. She stood up and went to tend the fire because she needed something to do with her hands. She rebuilt it from the coals, careful, deliberate, the way she did everything, and when it was burning steadily, she sat back down. The council meeting is tomorrow, she said. Yes. What are you going to do? He looked at the fire. What do you want me to do? She thought about that. She thought about 5 days in a chair by a man's bed, and a wolf pressing its shoulder against her knee, and a piece of armor she hadn't known was being offered. She thought about the elder's careful face and the smooth-voiced advisor and the younger man in the doorway who had told her Vaelor's name. I want you to be honest, she said. In the room tomorrow, whatever that costs. He looked at her for a long moment. All right, he said. The wolf's tail moved once against the floor. The council meeting was held in the great hall on the 7th day, while the frost was still on the stones, and the morning torches were burning at half-height. Marin had not been invited. She came anyway, because no one had specifically told her not to, and because she had learned over the years that the things that happened in rooms you weren't invited to were usually the things that mattered most. She stood at the back. The wolf came with her. The council was 8 people plus Senna, plus the smooth-voiced advisor, whose name she had learned was Counselor Dane. Vaelor sat at the head of the table, in a chair that was clearly his, dressed for the first time in something other than a sickbed, and he looked like a man who had been ill for a month and was refusing to show it, which was accurate. Counselor Dane opened the proceedings. He was very good at his job. He praised Marin's work. He expressed gratitude for her service. He used the phrase, the pack stability, twice, and the phrase outside influence once, and he built with great care and precision the argument that a healer who was not pack-bound, who had no formal allegiance, who had formed an unusual attachment with the king's wolf, represented an uncertainty that the pack could not afford during a period of recovery. He was proposing in the smoothest possible terms that she be compensated and sent away. When he finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Vaelor said, "No, just that. Flat and final." Councillor Dane's voice went very smooth. "My lord." "No," Vaelor said again. He was looking at the table, not at Dane. "She found what your healers missed. She stayed when she didn't have to. The wolf," he paused. "The wolf has not been wrong in 11 years. I'm not going to dismiss what he knows because it's inconvenient. The bond," Dane began, "is mine to name or not name," Vaelor said. He looked up. His eyes found Marin at the back of the room. Something shifted in his expression, not much, just a fraction, and I'm naming it. The room went very still. Senna at the far end of the table did not look surprised. The younger man, his name was Aldrich, she had learned, he was Vaelor's beta, looked at Marin with an expression that was quietly satisfied, as if something that had been out of alignment had just corrected itself. Councillor Dane said carefully, "My lord, the formal process can be arranged," Vaelor said, "today if necessary." Marin looked at the wolf beside her. The wolf was looking at Vaelor with its pale grey eyes, and its tail was moving in a slow, deliberate sweep against the stone floor. She looked at Vaelor. He was looking at her, she said, clearly enough for the room to hear. "I have some questions first." A small sound from somewhere at the table. Vaelor's expression did something she had not seen it do before. It opened, just slightly, at the edges. "Ask them," he said. She walked to the front of the room. She did not look at Councillor Dane. She stopped in front of Vaelor's chair and looked at him directly. "The wolf knew before you did," she said. "Yes. You've known since the first morning." "Yes, and you were going to let the council send me away without saying anything." A pause. "I was trying to determine what you wanted, by not telling me what was happening." "Yes." Another pause. "That was a mistake." She held his gaze. "The mate who left," she said, 4 years ago. Something moved in his space. Not pain, exactly. Something that had been pain for long enough that it had become a different shape. "She left because I couldn't name it," he said. "I could feel it. I couldn't say it. I waited too long and she stopped believing it was real. And now I've spent 11 days dying, and the wolf has been carrying armor to a woman he chose on sight, and I am done waiting for the right moment." His voice was flat and final, and something else underneath it, something that had been held for a long time and was being set down carefully. "I'm asking you to stay. Not because the wolf chose you, though he did, because I looked at you for 7 days, and I couldn't look away." The silence in the room was absolute. Marin looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the first morning, and the shutters, and the terrible tea, and the wolf lying down when she said not yet. She thought about the armor she hadn't known was being given. She thought about a man who had lost a mate to silence and had spent 4 years learning to be still instead of learning to speak. "I'm not pack-bound," she said. "I know. I travel. It's how I work. I know that too. I'm not going to stop. I'm not asking you to." She looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at her with its pale grey eyes, and she thought about the first night crouching on the landing and saying, "I'm not promising anything yet," and the wolf standing and moving aside. She looked at Vaelor. "All right," she said. The wolf made the sound it had made at the 4th hour of that first night, the low, chest-deep exhale that was almost a word. Several people at the table heard it and went very still. Councillor Dane cleared his throat. Vaelor looked at him. "The formal process," Vaelor said. "Arrange it." The ceremony was held 3 days later when the frost had cleared from the upper courtyard and the morning was sharp and cold and bright. Marin had not expected ceremony. She had said as much to Vaelor the evening before, and he had said that the pack needed to witness it, which she understood to be true even if she was not certain she was ready for it. She wore her own clothes. She had not brought anything ceremonial, and when Senna had appeared the previous afternoon with something folded in grey-green and soft, she had looked at it for a moment and then put it on, because Senna had a way of offering things that made refusal feel like a failure of imagination. The pack gathered in the upper courtyard, not all of them. Ironhold was large, and many of its wolves were in the outlying territories, but enough. She walked out from the keep's inner door, and they were there arranged in a loose arc, watching her come. She kept her eyes forward. She did not see the bowing start. She felt it, a shift in the air, a change in the quality of the silence. And when she looked up, the nearest wolves had lowered their heads, and then the ones behind them, and then the ones at the edges of the arc, a slow ripple moving outward from her position, like water from a stone dropped in still water. She stopped walking. She had heard of pack recognition. She had treated pack members who had described it. She had never been the center of it, and the experience was she searched for the word and did not find one. It was the particular sensation of being seen by something much larger than yourself and found, not wanting but sufficient. It was the kind of thing that could not be argued with. She started walking again. Vaelor was standing at the far end of the courtyard. He had been watching her from the moment she came through the door, and he looked steadier than he had any right to look for a man 10 days out of a sickbed, and something else, something she recognized as the expression of a person who has been holding a truth for a long time and is finally being permitted to put it down somewhere permanent. The wolf was at his side. She stopped in front of him. He looked at her for a moment, just a moment, quiet and direct, and then he spoke. The formal language of pack bonding was old. She knew some of it from the manuscripts she had read in her travels, but hearing it spoken aloud was different. He said her name. He said the bond's name. He said, in the plain language that came after the formal, that he had known since the first morning, that his wolf had known before even that, and that he was naming it now in front of his pack, because silence had cost him something before, and he was not going to let it cost him again. She said what she needed to say. She had thought about it the night before, sitting by the fire while the wolf slept beside her chair, and she had decided to say the true thing, rather than the careful thing. She said she had come for the work and stayed for the man. She said the wolf had known something she hadn't let herself know yet, and that she was grateful for the wolf's impatience. She said she was not pack-born and would not pretend to be, but that she understood what it meant to be claimed, and was choosing to be claimed here, by this man, in this place. She said it clearly enough for the courtyard to hear. The pack was very still. Then, from somewhere near the back, a child's voice said, "She's the one the wolf brought the armor to." A ripple of something, not laughter but its warmer cousin, moved through the gathered wolves. Vaelor's expression did the thing it had done in the great hall, the slight opening at the edges, and this time it went further. He reached out and took her hand. The first time he had touched her, she realized, in 10 days of proximity, and his hand was warm and steady, and held hers with the care of a man who understood what he was holding. "Yes," he said, "to the courtyard, to the child, to no one in particular. She is." The wolf sat between them and looked out at the pack with its pale gray eyes, and its tail swept the frost-dusted stone once, slowly, and then was still. In the days that followed, Ironhold settled into something new, not different. The stones were the same, the wolves were the same, the council still met, and the borders still needed tending. But the quality of the stillness in the keep changed. It was the stillness of something that had finally stopped bracing, rather than the stillness of something waiting for the next blow. Vaelor recovered in stages the way she had told him he would. His appetite came back first, then his strength, then the particular focused attention she had learned to recognize as his natural state, the way he looked at problems and at people, carefully, without rushing the looking. He was, she discovered, a man who had learned to be very controlled and had spent 4 years mistaking control for sufficiency. He was also, underneath the control, someone who noticed things, small things, the way she organized her kit, the way she talked to wolves before she talked to the people in the room, the way she rebuilt fires from coals instead of starting them new. He did not say this directly. He showed it in the way he paid attention, which was its own kind of language. She stayed through the month, and then through the next, and at some point the staying stopped being a decision she was making and became simply the shape of things. One evening she came back from a day in the outer territories, a difficult berth, a long ride, mud on her boots and her hair coming loose, and found Vaelor in the study with the wolf asleep at his feet and a fire burning at exactly the right height, which meant someone had tended it recently. He looked up when she came in. "How was it?" he asked. "Long," she said. "Both of them are fine." He nodded. He had a cup of something warm on the table beside him, and he pushed it toward the edge nearest her chair without being asked. She sat down. She pulled off her boots. The wolf stirred at the sound, lifted its head, looked at her, and then put its head back down with the air of something that had confirmed what it needed to confirm and was satisfied. She looked at Vaelor. "The wolf is asleep," she said. He glanced down at it. "He's been asleep since the afternoon. He had a long morning. What did he do this morning?" "He followed Aldrich around the outer ward for 2 hours and then came back and slept. I think he was checking on things." She looked at the wolf, enormous and silver, and utterly relaxed its great head on its paws, its breathing slow and even. She thought about the first night, the landing, the pale gray eyes tracking her from the moment she rounded the stair. She thought about the armor, the weight against her knee, the low exhale at the 4th hour. "He was right, you know," she said. Vaelor looked up. "About me," she said. "Before you were—" A pause. Something moved in his expression, warm and a little rueful and entirely unguarded. "I know," he said. "Does that bother you?" He considered the question with the care he gave everything. "No," he said. "He usually is." She picked up the cup and held it with both hands. It was tea and it was good, and someone had known to make it without being asked. "I'm going to need to ride out again in a week," she said. "There's a pack near the Stormlands pass that sent a message, a fever going through the young ones." "I know," he said. "Aldrich told me this morning. I was going to ask if you wanted company for the first day of the ride." She looked at him. "Just the first day," he said. "I'm not trying to manage your work." "I know you're not," she said. She looked at the fire, which was burning steadily, and the wolf asleep beside it, and the man across from her who had learned to speak before silence could take something else from him. "Yes," she said. "Come for the first day." He nodded. He picked up his book. She drank her tea. The wolf slept on. The fire held. "Pack, that's where we leave them. In a study in Ironhold, with a wolf asleep by the fire, and a bond that was named 11 days later than the wolf would have preferred. Here's what I want to know. When Marin came through that door on the first morning and the wolf stood and moved aside, do you think she knew, even then? Not the bond, not the name of it, but something underneath the name. Or was it only later, when she was sitting in that chair at 4 a.m. with a man's breathing changing in the dark, that she started to understand what she'd walked into? Tell me. In the comments I read, every one. And if you know someone who would sit in a cold chair for 7 days because the work mattered and the patient mattered, and the wolf had already decided, share this with them. That's the kind of person the story was made for. Until the next one, pack.